in Errand of Mercy, an episode of Star Trek that is one of these that goes about establishing the Star Trek universe. Whether that was the intent at the time, which I rather doubt, doesn't matter. It sort of pretty much stipulates here the state between the Federation, Starfleet, and the Klingon Empire. Well, they've had these negotiations going on, and oh boy, they fell apart. So they're on their highest alert for war, and the Enterprise is ordered to go to the planet of Organia, which is a non-aligned planet that's near the Klingon border. However that works, I wonder how many distances between stars do they count as territory? I don't know. But a given star system, I imagine, they would consider, well, this is disputed territory, or we consider it ours, whatever. But anyway, that's basically the situation here. So the Enterprise is sent to this planet, and they don't know a whole lot about it. They beam down, and it seems a rather primitive, a town. It looks rather medieval, if that. And but the odd thing about it, right off the bat, you can tell that it's not what it appears to be, because Kirk and Spock, they beam down to open talks with these people and offer their protection and whatnot. And as they beam down, these rather primitive people in this village are just going about their business and don't even notice them beaming down. And Kirk says, man, they act like it happens every day, Yeah, that should have been their first clue. Right off the bat, Spock is curious about this, so Kirk goes into the negotiations himself while Spock goes about investigating the town. Kirk visits with them, explains the situation, and the Klingons are on their way. And the people just say, hey, we don't want to get in any fights or anything, so we appreciate the offer, but we're not going to accept anything or try to get in the middle of your dispute with the Klingons. And Kirk's like, hey, come on, this is serious. And then Spock comes in and says, hey, I've just scanned the whole area, and boy, there's just really no development whatsoever. I mean, this planet seems to have been frozen in time. And Kirk and Spock are real puzzled about this. Then all of a sudden they start saying, oh no, we're sensing new ships arriving and all this stuff, and the Klingon fleet has arrived. Kirk has to tell the Enterprise to hightail it out there, come back with more Federation ships. And so Sulu reluctantly has to agree to that. It's kind of similar to what happened in the with the Gorn and all that. And so let's take off. And so now Organia is pretty much under the domination of the Klingons. Commander Kor arrives, and I believe the actor John Kalikos, I believe how you pronounce it, did have some say in how the Klingons would look. They were going for the script, I believe, said they called it a hard Oriental-faced look. Well, okay, it was the times, and but the general idea was for a Genghis Khan-like appearance, and that's what you see. So I believe it was Dorothy Fontana who was more interested in using Romulans. But the Romulans were a problem because you got to keep putting pointed ears on them. And so they decided the Klingons would be easier because they're basically just people in costumes, and that's it. Of course, we now know that, well, that was all because of some messing around with the eugenics formula that resulted in Khan and his people. One of the really cool plot points of Enterprise, which took links to try to fit this and make it work and explain it, and it's a pretty good idea. So it's too bad later people didn't explore the ideas of what would have happened within the Klingon race to having people who basically looked human and those who didn't, and would that create divisions within it and all that sort of thing. But unfortunately, the current holders of Star Trek never watched Star Trek, so they didn't know that when they developed their Klingons. I guess. So anyway, so basically you have this standoff between the two, and this really sets the stage with the Klingons. The big problem here, in some ways, is that this is also yet another episode of godlike aliens with these powers. And of course, the Organians are not, like I said, they're not what they appear to be. It's all for show for anybody who happens to come to their planet. They're not even really humanoid people. They say that one time they were, but they've since evolved to beings of pure energy. Pure energy, pure energy. And not only that, but they have, again, these godlike powers, and they decide to put an end to hostilities before they even start between the Klingons and the humans, and said, you're going to have to work it out, and in fact, in the future, you're going to work together, which now kind of fits with predicting, Star Trek, The Next Generation, with Worf being a member of the crew of the Enterprise and all that. So it's an interesting outset for the episode, kept to itself, but then it's like, well, the idea that there would be future wars between the Klingons, how is that possible? Because these people are capable of freezing the fleets on a whim. The DC Comics, when they had the rights or the license to Star Trek in the 80s, did a story like this where Kirk was referring to that and said, how's this possible? How are the Klingons and the Federation going to war now? There was attacks and all this stuff. And when he says, when the Organian Peace Treaty, as they called it, made it impossible, and says, what kind of treaty is that? Well, they have godlike power to keep your fleets frozen if you try to go to war. And so that's that. Well, in that story, it was another creature we'll meet later who also has godlike powers, but likes to watch wars to learn from them. And so this one, he basically counters the power of the Organians and causes the war to take place so that he can see which side could win. But we'll get to that in a later episode. But so that was an interesting thing for the comic book, but that doesn't really go a long way to explain this problem, unless it, because if they had kept it where in the immediate area, that was the range and reach of their power, and conflicts with the Klingons and the Federation can happen later, and we certainly see that. Certainly in the movie, The Search for Spock, there's all this, violent stuff, and then Undiscovered Country, there's the Klingons are in trouble, but there's still a rather sizable faction within the Empire and the Federation wanting the war to continue, and it's things like that. The threat of the war would have been lost no matter whether they wanted it or not. And that was the embarrassing moment for Kirk when he realizes I have a right to go to war, Captain. So it's a bit of a problem, and that other than that comic book, I don't think it's ever mentioned again. The conflict between Kirk and Core is mentioned again later on in Deep Space Nine when the actor John Colicos reprises the role, now in full makeup of Klingon makeup, which I guess at some point, being embarrassed of looking all too human, he maybe he had plastic surgery done to look more like a Klingon, or perhaps they manifest later in age, and the lifespan of a Klingon is much longer than that of a human, but what have you. So but it's an interesting episode, and it's certainly an important one because it does really establish the Klingons in the Star Trek narrative. So it's a good one, and it's of course the debate of war and stuff. If a god could stop you, would you learn to give up your hatreds and the problems? And they both go about, well, we've got reasons, and yeah, but your solution as being war is worse than the problem you have, and sort of stuff like that, So, all that's well and good, but it does create a bit of a problem here and there. At some point, if only people with talent and interest in Star Trek would address something like that, that would be a good challenge. There's just so many things like that, but unfortunately, as it stands now, Star Trek just isn't addressing anything Star Trek. So don't hold your breath on anything like that. So there you go, Errand of Mercy. A fascinating and once again another very significant episode for Star Trek. Thank you for watching and listening. Say, why not like and subscribe, and check out that link description below that'll take you to my many stores that have plenty of goodies for you, most notably my comic book Night over at anyplanet.com. Oh yeah. And you'll want to catch my podcast, Mr Nailsin Show, over at radiomisfits.com. And of course, if you so desire, you can also watch my videos over at BitChute.